Let me just start with the Government of India's role first. Given the huge size of the country and the number of states, I think the Government of India has done a terrific job in terms of providing drinking water and sanitation to a level of basic amenities to all the citizens in all the states. And it's a remarkable coverage. We have, there was a point when it was about 96% coverage in the rural areas and more than 90% coverage in terms of access to drinking water and sanitation in the urban areas. However, if we start digging further, one realizes the access is there, but it's, say, half an hour of water supply in a city like Delhi, even less, 15 minutes in other cities, and some cities even have it, say, 1 hour in 3 days or 1 hour over a week. In the rural areas, it's a more complex problem given the water quality issues, sources going dry, etc. So while the Government of India and the state governments have focused in providing access to drinking water and sanitation in terms of basic facilities, there is a huge challenge in terms of sustainability, in terms of meeting the demands of the growing population in the cities, meeting the demands, the rising demands in the rural areas where they now want not just shared connections, but they want individual connections. So how do we meet these demands? And how do we meet these demands in a manner which is sustainable, which is cost effective, which really implies the minimum operating costs which can be affordable? So it's all caters around to those 3 bullet points: reliability, sustainability, and making sure that these are affordable. And those were the messages also of an earlier bank report that we did. And I think that stands even good today, that despite the huge coverage, the problem of sustainability, of actually ensuring that the services which should be rendered to the citizens are actually provided. How do we ensure it? That's the big question. And that's the role of the World Bank in terms of piloting schemes, in terms of scaling up these schemes, in terms of demonstrating projects. So in both urban and the rural sectors, the role of the bank has been to showcase how to move forward on the reform agenda, how to bring about institutional changes in terms of decentralizing responsibilities to the Gram Panchayats, how to bring about the processes, procedures, the kind of mechanisms which are necessary, not just to improve infrastructure, but to make sure that these are sustained and they are maintained in terms of being cost effective. There have been a couple of good examples recently. One is, of course, the compendium, which is a compendium of good practices in the rural water sector area. And it has good practice examples which showcase what the Government of India has done through its national program, what the state governments have done through their programs, as well as what the World Bank has contributed to the sector. So it's indeed a compendium of good practices. It's also thematic. It's presented in a way which deals with different subtopics or sub-areas, so that one comes to know which are the good practices in source sustainability or in service delivery or in terms of reform agenda, etc. It's come out very well. I would just mention that the WSP can think of having a similar compendium on the World Bank projects, especially for the rural water sector, because of the 2-decade involvement of the World Bank in the sector, and more than 9 projects and huge areas covered with a lot of good practices. So maybe the WSP should think of a similar compendium for the World Bank. Another example is the Rural Water Report, which is actually work in progress. We've had our discussions and deliberations in terms of how to actually put down the value added of the World Bank projects to the sector, and the work is progressing well. I think it would be a good example, because it actually would bring to the attention of the policymakers and the state governments what are the challenges in moving on a reform agenda, what should be the pace of movement of this reform agenda, what are those priority reforms that can be adopted quickly, what are those which would take much longer. So it will bring about not just good practices, but also the challenges in moving on the reform agenda.